My name is Jennifer Bond. This is my environmental issues project for Biology 1312 with Professor Lang at the University of Houston downtown. My project is on the overexploitation of aquatic animals. The overexploitation of aquatic animals is the harvesting of an aquatic animal species faster than it can reproduce. In the aquatic ecosystem, there are two main types, which are freshwater and marine. The freshwater ecosystem consists of lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, wetlands, and springs. It is home to more than 40% of the world's fish species and provides most of our drinking water. Freshwater biomes have less than 1% salt. The largest freshwater biome in the United States is the Everglades in Florida. Freshwater ecosystems cover almost 20% of the earth and are in various locations around the world. No two freshwater biomes are exactly the same. And one of the interesting things that's a part of the freshwater biome is the Nile, the longest river in the world. Because freshwater ecosystems are located all over the world, there is no specific geographic location. This is just a global issue. Some abiotic components of the freshwater ecosystem are oxygen, sunlight, nutrients, stratification, wind, and water depletion. Some biotic components are predators, competition for food, overexploitation, invasive species, and some examples of species are crocodiles, turtles, and frogs. The marine ecosystem contains the ocean, which covers 70% of the Earth's surface and contains 97% of the planet's water. It is the world's largest biome. The ocean absorbs heat from the sun, which helps stabilize the Earth's climate. 53% of the world's fisheries are fully exploited, and 32% are overexploited, depleted, or recovering from depletion. The global fishing fleet is 2 to 3 times larger than what the oceans can sustainably support. And the marine ecosystem contains 100 million species. Marine biodiversity is far more advanced than that on land. The marine ecosystem also produces 70% of our oxygen. Some abiotic components of the marine ecosystem are salinity, sunlight, oxygen, pH, and temperature. And some biotic components are predators, migration, competition for food, overexploitation, climate, and some example species are sharks, phytoplankton, coral reefs, and dolphins. Ecological impact. The bluefin tuna, all 3 of their species are facing extinction, and overexploitation of this species destroys balance of the ecosystem because it is a top predator, and it also decreases genetic diversity. Dolphins are also a part of the marine ecosystem. They are a product of bycatch due to overharvesting, which basically means that when fishermen are fishing for a particular type of species, they accidentally end up catching dolphin, or the dolphins get stuck into the nets. And this destroys the balance of the ecosystems, upsets the predator and prey relationship, and also causes the unnecessary deaths of a lot of dolphins that are caught. Another species that's part of the marine ecosystem is the coral reef. Loss of a natural balance in the coral reef ecosystems is one of the impacts associated with overexploitation. It has also caused algae to become dominant on the reefs, and the shallow coral reefs areas are affected the most. Chesapeake Bay oysters have also been subjected to overexploitation. Oysters are natural water filters, so overharvesting reduces the ecosystem's water quality. It also influences the rate of nutrient cycling and the stability of the ecosystem. It decreases the formation of algae blooms, and it decreases oxygen availability. Green sea turtles have also been subjected to overexploitation. The exploitation of these turtles limits genetic diversity and population size due to the harvesting of their eggs and meat. It jeopardizes the health of seagrass beds that are maintained by green turtles. It reduces the fertilization of dune vegetation and the health of the ecosystem. And these particular turtles are usually found in the Mesoamerican reefs, coastal East Africa, the Gulf of California, the Galapagos, and the Coral Triangle. Freshwater mussels have also been subjected to overexploitation. The exploitation of mussels decreases water quality, reduces the availability of food, eliminates the support provided to other aquatic animals in the ecosystem. And some examples of places where freshwater mussels can be found is Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Another species affected by overexploitation is the Mekong giant catfish. They're part of the freshwater ecosystem, and the exploitation that they deal with changes the balance of the ecosystem. It eliminates the support provided to other aquatic animals, and they're typically found in the Mekong River. Blue crabs have also been overexploited. These particular crabs are very common along Chesapeake Bay, and when they are subjected to overfishing, it alters the population of the ecosystem. There's a loss of salt marsh habitats, and it manipulates the predator-prey relationships in the ecosystem. Sockeye salmon has various species across the U.S., and several of them being in Washington. And when they are overexploited, it prevents the nutrients that are distributed by salmon to rivers with low productivity from reaching those areas. It also removes the support provided to the other habitats, and so of course that's a big issue. Goliath frog is another species that is on the verge of extinction due to overexploitation, and by overharvesting these particular frogs, it is manipulating the regulation of the insect population within these ecosystems. It also eliminates food sources for other species, and these frogs are typically found in places like West Africa. The economic impact of overexploitation of aquatic animals. Start again with the bluefin tuna. It's a delicacy that's used in sushi and sashimi. It has a substantial impact on the livelihood of fishermen because a single fish has sold for as much as $1.75 million. In addition to that, it's a staple in the human diet. So not having these species around is going to be a very big issue. Dolphins also have a big economic impact due to overexploitation. In addition to the harm to the actual animal, dolphins can cause significant damage to fishing equipment. This can cost fishermen a great deal of money to repair or replace, as well as the cost associated with the amount of time they are unable to fish. And of course, there's also the cost associated with the care of the dolphin and the cleanup, especially when these animals, wash up on beaches and things of that nature. All of those, the blood and, whatever their injuries must be assessed and taken care of. Coral reefs have been known to be used in saltwater aquariums. There's a loss of millions of dollars by the ornamental fish industry. The world export value in 1998 of ornamental fish was 174 million, with imports valued at 257 million. Just about every pet store that you go into that carries saltwater fish carries coral reefs. So this is also a very widespread issue. The Chesapeake Bay oysters are a food source for humans. They also provide employment in the form of shucking and packing houses, transport, manufacture of prepared oyster products, and retail sales. And Americans eat roughly 2.5 million oysters every year, according to the Molluscan Shellfish Institute of North America. Green sea turtles are used for jewelry and other items. They're utilized as a food source in some countries like Central America and Asia. And they maintain seagrass beds, which are important to commercial fishing because they function as nurseries for multiple species in the ecosystem. Mussels are used to make freshwater pearls, and significant financial losses to pearl farmers and the cultured pearl industry would basically take place if these mussels were not readily available. The Mekong giant catfish are generally fished for sport or hobby. Fishermen are drawn to this fish because it is a behemoth. So, in a sense, it would take away the excitement that they get from getting these animals and being able to say that they've caught one. Blue crabs are among the most heavily harvested creatures on the planet. They're primarily for human consumption, and they're consumed all of the time. Humans eat a ridiculous amount of blue crab within a year, and these, of course, are typically found within Chesapeake Bay. Sockeye salmon is also used for human consumption. Bristol Bay sockeye salmon reported earnings of almost 100 million in 2014, and this was considered to be a record low. So I can only imagine how much sockeye salmon was sold on a record high. They're the third most consumed seafood in the United States from reports back in 2010. The Goliath frog is used in the pet and zoo trade due to their size. They've also been used in illegal frog jumping contests, which I didn't even realize they had. And they're consumed as a delicacy in some countries. Current research. For the bluefin tuna, the WWF has been tagging Atlantic bluefin tuna in the Mediterranean Sea to learn more about the species. There's also been the collection of analysis of statistical information relative to current conditions and trends of the fishery resources in the convention area by the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. The tagging has enabled them to learn about the bluefin tuna's migration behavior, which they use to help protect them. And also with regards to conservation, setting a global total allowable catch helps because it helps rebuild the stock over a period of time, and this has been set by the Commission for the Conservation of Southern Bluefin Tuna. Some of the obstacles that are faced are illegal fishing and lack of enforcement and control. For dolphins, the UN has banned the use of large-scale drift nets, and the EU has also placed a ban on drift nets of any length. These are basically partial solutions to a problem that is the leading factor in mortality of numerous cetacean species. Some of the obstacles are the lack of enforcement and control and illegal fishing for human consumption. Coral reefs. The NOAA Coral Reef Watch uses satellite sea surface temperature data to alert managers and scientists around the world of the risk of coral bleaching. The National Coral Reef Ecosystem Monitoring Program supports local shallow water coral reef ecosystem monitoring activities, and there's also been research performed by the Coral Reef Early Warning System. They have stations that monitor the health of coral reefs at major U.S. coral reef areas. For conservation, they have reduced land-based sources of pollution from agricultural runoff, sewage outfall, erosion from the bare soils, and unsustainable harvest, as well as other key threats. And also, well-managed marine protected areas are effective tools to protect and restore coral reef ecosystems. Some obstacles are pollution, overexploitation for profit, and the use of explosive devices to break up coral. With the Chesapeake Bay oyster, there's been research regarding the development of disease-resistant oyster strains, some ground-truthing hydroacoustic evaluations of oyster leases, and graduate student research on seropreservation of oyster gametes, larval settlement on oil-contaminated substrates, improved oyster breeding, and oyster fertilization synchrony. With regards to conservation, oyster sanctuaries like Harris Creek in Maryland, which prohibits the harvesting of oysters, the lowering the daily recreational harvest per person, vessel, and possession limit, as well as lowering the daily commercial harvest and possession limit. Obstacles are the climate, the idea that no problem exists, and the misconception that non-native species can replace native species. With the green sea turtle, there's been satellite telemetry, which allows researchers to track sea turtles as they swim from place to place. The data describes important feeding areas and help us understand the migration patterns and anticipate where turtles may come in contact with fisheries and their gear. As far as conservation efforts go, the WWF establishes marine protected areas to ensure sea turtles have a safe place to nest, feed, and migrate freely. The decrease of turtle deaths caused by commercial fishing through the enforcement of the TED, or the Turtle Excluder Device, and gillnet regulation, and crack down on illegal international trade in sea turtles and their products by enforcing the laws and agreements. And the obstacles are artificial lighting disturbances, illegal fishing, pollutants that are dumped in the water, and of course, ignorance. With regard to mussels, the FMCC is currently involved in 2 mussel population restoration projects in the Upper Clinch River in Tazewell and Russell Counties, Virginia, and in the Powell River in Lee County, Virginia, and Hannock and Claiborne counties in Tennessee. Conservation efforts include limiting harvesting, stream bank revetment, monitoring programs to assess the status of freshwater mussel communities, and obstacles are overharvesting, pollutants that are dumped into the water, as well as water quality issues. Mekong giant catfish. There is a Mekong fish conservation project in cooperation with the Cambodian Department of Fisheries, which conducts research, conservation, and education on vulnerable populations of migratory fish of the Mekong, notably the Mekong giant catfish. Since 2000, the project has bought, tagged, and released over 20 Mekong giant catfish into the Tonlap Sap River and the Tonle Sap Lake. With regards to conservation, the artificial breeding, providing incentives for biodiversity conservation, and restricting the quota license to less than 20 catches annually. Obstacles are illegal fishing, pollutants that are dumped in the water, and habitat loss. With the blue crab, the main obstacles are water quality, illegal fishing, crab habitat, and nutrient loading. Conservation efforts have included the decrease in nitrogen and phosphorus pollution in the bay, eliminating dead zones created by algae blooms that kill the food that crabs eat and force crabs to find oxygen in shallow waters where they are more easily caught, and also restricting the total annual harvest to below 25.5% of all females, which has been a proven successful tool. Research has been conducted by the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, which is testing the feasibility of rearing juvenile blue crabs using hatchery technology for release into the Chesapeake Bay to restore the recruitment limited spawning stock. And with sockeye salmon, research has been focused on captive broadstock rearing efforts at the Manchester Research Station, including gene rescue efforts for the U.S. Endangered Species Act, which lists the Snake River sockeye from the Redfish Lake in the upper headwaters of the Salmon River in the Sawtooth Valley in Idaho. Conservation efforts include the Snake River sockeye hatchery program that raises the fish and then releases them back into the ecosystem when they are adults, ecosystem-based management, the creation of reserves and protective areas, and obstacles include erosion and sedimentation, illegal fishing, water depletion, and disease. With the Goliath frog, their primary research has been on captive breeding programs to replenish the species. Conservation efforts include limiting the amount of frogs that can be exported each year, wildlife sanctuaries that are protected areas, captive breeding programs that also need to be considered in order to maintain population sizes. And obstacles include exportation for zoos, commercial logging, illegal hunting, and habitat loss. And here's my works cited pages.